Welcome one and all to Last Stop Penn Station podcast featuring Cary Silkin and Ian Riccaboni. They dive deep into Cary's wealth of stories, and no subject is off limits. From the world of wrestling to his ticket agency, growing up in New Jersey, drug-fueled underground days, hustling in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and endless days and nights in New York City, every story is worth telling.
Cary, after all these years, the Camel is vindicated. He was right. There's a lot of germs in the air, and it's something that I'm so glad that we're here together. We're socially distanced. We're in the same room
and tested.
Yeah, we're tested. We're socially distanced. The only podcast that is tested. We've had the tests, the antibody tests. But we're still 6 feet apart. And we're excited to get back into Last Stop Penn Station. The thrilling conclusion. Lamb Chop's here. Lamb Chop's here too.
Chop's in the house. She's a little lady. Yeah, it is. I'm welcome back, Ian.
Yeah,
AJ, and people probably are wondering. Since 99 9/10 of podcasts are done remotely. Why didn't we do it remotely? And we may be doing some remotely in the future. But at least for me, and I think I could speak for all of us, part of the charm of the podcast and one of the reasons it works so well was for me, the interaction with you.
No.
And doing it live. Now, would we have been able to get that via Skype or Zoom? Maybe. But some of those belly laughs. Speaking of belly, looking back on some of the great moments of the first season with Empire Industries and Belly Mel, and I got you going already. With the all-purpose cleaner and degreaser, right? And me tell you. So, if you're new to the podcast, check them all out. They're all good, but the bonus episodes, there's some real laughs in there. And you're right. The Camel,
he was vindicated.
He was a great prophet.
He is.
Don't forget my last words ever with the Camel was that when I was walking through Port Authority bus terminal, after not seeing him since his ZZ Top
extravaganza.
And there he was. And he's like, hey, come here. And at that point in time, the small handkerchief.
Right. So I wore a mask to come over to Cary's. I had to make a stop, and yeah, so my face is completely covered at this point. So this is what it sounds like when someone's mouth and nose is covered. But
right.
But you're saying he had
like a. Wasn't a hand, wash, like a wash towel. It was that intermediate size. It wasn't a bath towel, but it was that, like you buy a set of towels, your wife drags you to buy towels and Bed Bath and Beyond. Oh, look, they have the complete set, right?
And you never know what to do with the middle one.
Right.
And then,
well, the Camel knew what to do with the middle one. So yeah, that was it. So when I saw him, and I just wanted to get away from him and just get my bus. And, he well, come back. and he said, I'll be very careful. I go, yeah, I know. There's a lot of germs going around. He goes, yeah, but be very careful of all those other guys. They're going to rob you. I'm like, oh, Camel, I know. Bye.
Oh, my goodness.
Where is he today?
Yeah, that would be, I know you've been reconnecting with some of the folks that we've talked about on the podcast on Facebook.
And some we haven't even gotten to yet.
Wow.
Like the great Momma Pretzel.
Yeah.
She's got so many names. Samira. That's her real name.
Mm-hmm.
And I just started calling her Natasha because of
Rocky and Bullwinkle, or because
she had like she was either Middle Eastern or
Ukrainian.
Yeah, like she was from like Transylvania. All of our characters like Dracula.
Everybody turns into Bela Lugosi when Cary does an impression.
And plus, she smoked 3 to 4 packs of non-filtered Camels a day.
Wow, and is she still alive? Oh my god! Oh my god!
Yes. I showed you that. I showed you
video,
that video recently where Natasha claimed. If we were, we do no preparation, as some of our listeners know. I could have had it ready. We could have played the audio clip. The last time I saw her, and I had played this for Ian and AJ, I was with our friend Liam,
mm-hmm.
and we were going to Hadestown for the 18th time, which I can't wait for it to come back.
Yeah.
I can't wait for anything to come back.
Yeah.
But and it was a rainy day. Excuse me. And Natasha was hanging out, and I got her on a roll and asking her questions. And one question said, "What was the most money you ever made in one day?" And she goes, 40,000.
Yeah.
And I said, no, one day. She goes, yeah, one day, $40,000. Rolling Stones in Houston. He goes, Houston. And what they used to call fake tickets were blinkers.
Oh.
Now, blinkers were popular. I would not deal with blinkers, although we're going to have a good story in the coming season of when myself and Freddie the Weeper got bamboozled, and we didn't get fleeced. We got it was like a Murphy'd.
There's so you paused and bamboozled and fleeced. It seems there's a tier. There's a tier system.
Right.
Okay. So you got bamboozled, but not fleeced. Fleeced is more severe than bamboozled.
Right.
Okay.
Well, we were. I guess they're sort of all the same. You're a willing participant.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're a con game. You're a willing participant in the con, right? You're allowing yourself to be take part in this, sort of like the guy accepting the cheese basket.
Right. Of course you take the cheese basket.
Right. Ooh, we'll send it to your wife. A little gift from That'd be nice. So, yeah, Freddie and I bought Springsteen tickets.
Oh, okay.
At the Garden.
Wow.
He was on, you would probably know this better than me. It was 88 maybe?
Yeah, it's a Tunnel of Love tour.
Yeah, it was huge.
Yeah.
And this guy, we didn't know, as a regular ticket hustler, he had a bunch of seats we were hanging around the Garden, and I don't think there was a show that night, but there was maybe, he might have done 7, 8 shows?
That would make sense. Yeah.
So there was maybe 5 or 6 left, and this guy had seats, and they were the same. They were middle floors, like section D, row 4, seats 1 to 12 for all the performances. And it turned out they were bogus.
Mm.
So but we'll save the rest of the story. But back to Natasha.
Okay.
Selena, Momma Pretzel.
Various aliases.
She got the Momma Pretzel.
No.
Well, she started her career as a pretzel vendor.
Hmm.
And she saw in the city, and she would say, I'd see these guys making money with this. We started doing T-shirts, and then we started doing tickets, and we go around the country. So she claimed that at this particular Rolling Stones show, which might have been at the Astrodome, or it might have been at the big stadium in Dallas, not the new one, the old where the Cowboys played. Anyway, the floor tickets were general admission. So classic blinkers, which they used to do for the Grateful Dead shows a lot, would be GA tickets because you don't have to have a separate section seat row, seat row, right? You just print in GA. So I said to Tasha when she goes, hey, we made 40,000. I go, yeah, but I said, but were the people getting in? She goes, yeah, they get in. I would not take them otherwise. Guy wanted to sell them to me $20 each. People were paying $50. He goes, so I tell him, let me make sure they get in. So she bought like 2 of them and walked the people up. Once she saw the people go in, she bought them. Wow. She had no compunction because the people were getting in.
Wow.
But
she sold nearly, that's close to 1,000 tickets.
Yeah.
It's 800 tickets.
Yeah. It was huge. Wow. So we'll get to Natasha.
Yeah.
We'll get to a lot of stuff. I guess we were trying to pay tribute to the Camel.
We were paying tribute to the Camel, and we're trying to have a little fun. We know that a lot of folks are going through some rough stuff right now. We're on the more fortunate end of the spectrum in that we do have testing. We do know that we have good health right now. And we do know that life goes on. We're excited about some of the things that Ring of Honor is about to do.
Yes.
Including we started a whole new series week by week with Quinn McKay, which is featuring.
I watched that today.
Yeah.
Very good.
Featuring the stars of Ring of Honor. We've done trivia nights. We're doing watch-alongs. We're doing all kinds of stuff on the YouTube page. So we're trying to stay busy. And, between me, you, AJ, and the hole in the wall, there's whole bunch of talks about maybe starting to see if things are safe as some of the states make these determinations with the scientists and things like that. So our fingers are crossed that I'd love to call some wrestling. I'll just say that, but only if things are safe.
It has to be safe. And a lot of the wrestling that I've seen from the other companies, some of it's been okay, is about as high a rating as you could give it.
Yeah.
Because it's rough to do wrestling in front of no people, but we also need some new content.
Yeah.
And but the key thing is being safe.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to see anyone getting sick, and we don't want to wind up like speaking of pretzels. There was another.
There's a second pretzel
in the ticket world.
Really?
Yeah.
We got to hear this.
It was Little Joe Pretzel. Do you want to know why he was called Joe Pretzel?
Sure.
He was not a pretzel vendor.
No?
No. He was like the, is antithesis the right word? What's the word of the opposite?
Yeah,
what
antithesis.
A scalper would be. Yeah.
Yeah, so he would just buy?
No. The antithesis being he wasn't like he was very meek.
Oh, okay.
He wasn't your typical ticket scalping guy. And Joe Pretzel got his name because I believe when he was born, he had a minor birth defect.
Okay.
Where his left arm was sort of twisted.
Gotcha.
And he didn't mind being called Pretzel.
Oh, poor man. Everybody in the 80s was so mean. What was there?
And he was like, you ever see the great Wally Cox? Right?
Wally Cox. I didn't expect to hear Wally Cox's name.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Right. Or he was like that.
We got to do an expose on why everybody was so mean in the 80s.
And here's the other thing.
Jeez.
Joe Pretzel worked with one of the weirdest guys. This guy, Buggo, Buggo, Buggo John. Now, Buggo John was this loud, frizzy-haired white kid from Queens, and none of the scalpers liked him, and he was very scared because...
he bugged out? Is that...
Well... Yeah, I guess that's how it must have. I never thought about it, but yeah. So somehow you got Buggo John and Joe Pretzel working as a team, which is a bizarre combination. So they would work the garden, and, Joe Pretzel would sort of like hold on to the tickets, and Buggo would run around. And they used to like to work Broadway, too. They worked the half price line. And I remember when I was sort of getting off the streets and I was working for some of these ticket agencies as a runner, and Miss Saigon was a big deal.
Right.
This is the early 90s.
Yep.
And Miss Saigon were late, maybe 1990. But I remember selling them a bunch of seats wholesale. But where I'm going with this, we're talking about people that didn't, we all want to be safe and we all want to be healthy. So unfortunately, Joe Pretzel, he wasn't, he had a lot of medical problems, and he developed cancer.
Oh.
And I hadn't seen him for a number of years. And there was another guy who used to hang around the half price line, and he was just a hustler. His name was Camel. And Camel was a former New York City school teacher. And he had I remember one time myself,
there's the belly laugh.
Myself, Camel, and the great Tennessee Slam.
This is a new character emerges.
Not Slam. His name,
Slim,
like,
but with it.
Slim, but he pronounced like Tennessee Slam. Right? We were smoking crack.
Oh, wow! Okay.
Smoking cocaine in the luxurious Carter Hotel on 43rd Street between 7th and 8th Avenue.
Wow!
It's still it's probably temporarily closed, but it still exists. The reviews for the Carter are so bad. If you look on TripAdvisor, even this is like in the 80s, but to this day, they're like one of my favorite all-time TripAdvisor reviews. It says, "Please avoid this hotel at all costs. We came on a long trip from St. Louis, Missouri for our first time in New York, and bed bugs and rats helped us carry the bags to the room." Right? And then at the Carter, I don't know if we talked about this on another podcast. I don't think so. It was so bad that they had designated rip-off rooms. So in other words, the family comes from St. Louis, schlepping their luggage. They're finally going to see Phantom of the Opera, and they're finally going to go to the Empire State Building, and they check in. And the moment they check in, as soon as the guy at the front desk who was in cahoots, they weren't all like this. He would see the whole family leave. They'd be like, he'd get on the phone like, "Yeah, 428, go ahead."
Wow.
And they would just go in there and
ransack.
Right. I was going to say police. They're just robbing the people.
Yeah.
So now the people.
Oh my God.
In this rat-infested,
bed-bugged, roached up.
Right.
Jeez, and you and Tennessee Slim were there smoking
and
crack?
Hamel.
Okay.
So yeah, and I remember that particular. We're never going to talk about Madison Square Garden. I remember that particular round. After smoking, it's terrible stuff. Hamel wanted to go see some jazz.
Is that a side effect? I've never partaken in
not seeing jazz. But Hamel wanted to get a few drinks and AJ's laughing. Yes, one of the popular side effects of crack cocaine is his desire to hear bebop. Ooh, Miles Davis is down the street. Let's go. But Hamel was playing. So like after we were suited out, Hamel like, "Come on, let's go get a few scotches. We'll go down to Village Vanguard."
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah,
right. So, but anyway, I'm sort of off. I'm out of the street business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going into the city for something, and I'm going through Times Square, and I see some of the denizens of the half-price line, which would be like Momma Pretzel. Mm-hmm. Camel at the time was around there. He unfortunately has passed away since then, but this is like 20 years ago. So I see Camel. Mm-hmm. And Camel was a cool guy. I know it really sold me on Camel. Because one time I was talking to him outside the garden, and I think someone like, not that they're a bad band, but someone like Iron Maiden was playing. And he's like, he goes, you know, he knew music, mm-hmm. you know, and he's like, this is garbage. And of course, I had to bring up Jethro. I go, yeah, man. I go, I saw Tall at the beginning. He goes, now that's an artist. That's an artist. So I was right there. Right, Hamel knows the stuff. But anyway, I see Hamel at the half price line, and I'm running down this list. Ooh, have you seen Mike Mountain? No, he ain't been around. Ooh, have you seen Blockhead? Yeah. Da, 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 da. I go, whatever happened to Joe Pretzel? He goes, no good, Cary.
Oh,
I go, what happened? He goes, well, you know, I knew he was sick. And he came around here a few months ago, and he wasn't looking really good. And he came up to me, and he said, you know, Hamel, yeah, I know you're a very smart man. You were a school teacher, and I know you're very educated. And, you know, I this cancer, he goes, I just can't take it. You know, these treatments, it was really sad. And he says to Hamel, he goes, Hamel, aren't there those countries where you can go? And Hamel says, Joe, you're talking like euthanasia? He's like, no, not Asia.
Oh,
he said, I think they're in Europe. He goes,
oh, no.
So he didn't understand. He goes, like, oh, you mean where they'll take you out of your misery?
Yeah.
And Joe's like, yeah. Where would that be? And Hamel's like, well, I'm pretty sure, like, if you go to Sweden or Norway, you could probably, I'm sorry to hear this, Pretzel, but if you go to Sweden or Norway, you could probably have this done. He goes, so Hamel says, so Joe Pretzel looks at me, he goes, Norway? That's too far.
Did he just split? He
goes, that's too far to go. So that was the last time I saw him. He said it'd be too expensive to get there.
But if he's, poor man.
So that's a quick story of Joe Pretzel.
So that's Joe Pretzel. Momma Pretzel was making $40,000 at the
Stones show,
but she was a mainstay around Madison Square Garden.
Still around.
I've seen the video. We won't dox her, as the kids say. We'll talk about her.
We'll go in depth about her.
Yeah,
and
she'll be one of our people, and this. People is, of course, the next set that we're going to do. We're trying to classify these together. I know that you wanted to talk about Larry Sweeney at some point. There's been a huge response to his inclusions in some of our other podcasts, so he's priority. We have your stories about John Belushi that are a big one. I know you mentioned Ric Flair as a topic at some point.
Absolutely.
And one of the men we will also be talking about, I assume, is Bruno Sammartino.
Yes.
The man who's sold out the world's most famous arena more than anybody. And he holds the record there. And the world's most famous arena, that's actually what we're talking about today, is Madison Square Garden, Cary.
That's right. And we were talking before we started that there was the current Madison Square Garden, which was opened in
1968, yeah.
Right. And prior to that, well, the original Madison Square Garden was by Madison Square Park. Now, I don't know if Madison Square Park was named for that or the Madison Square Garden was named because of Madison Square Park. Mm-hmm. I really don't know. I believe it was the late 1800s through maybe the 1920s. And and then they moved it to
went from 25th, 26th, and Madison up to 50th and 8th, or 50th and 7th?
Between 49th and 50th and 8th Avenue. Mm-hmm. And did you know there was a Madison Square Bowl?
No, actually,
Yes.
I never heard of this.
We didn't prepare as usual, but there was an outdoor stadium
Wow.
type of that you borrowed the name, or they were in cooperation together, where they would have outdoor boxing and wrestling and other events. I think it was in Queens.
Okay.
Maybe Brooklyn.
Yeah.
But I did get to go to the old Madison Square Garden one time.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Was it?
Go ahead.
Yeah. What for? What sport? For wrestling or?
Nope.
No. Okay.
No sports.
No sports. Huh.
It's an easy guess. I was a kid. My parents took me.
Concert?
No, this circus.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
yeah.
I went to Ringling Brothers.
Yeah.
And it was fascinating because when we went, it was still in the era where they had the sideshow, which is a lost art.
The Great Allentown Fair still has it, but
occasionally, right? I love when they have it. Last year they had a good one, but they had the sideshow, and I remember my mother was there. And we referenced my mother, and probably some of the things we said are in previous episodes. But my mom was. She wasn't high class, but she wasn't a sideshow person. And I remember the giant man. He was like 8 foot, or whatever they claimed he was.
Right.
Remember my father, they sold this ring that was like, why are you laughing?
In my head, I'm picturing all the items you can buy in the back of the comic books in the 50s and 60s.
It was the ring that would go on his finger. It was like, as a little boy, I could put like all my digits.
And just stick them right in.
Right. And so I went to that garden, the old Madison Square Garden, that one time. And that's my memory of it. I don't really remember much about the circus. But that land where it is, where it's had a lot of incarnations. Yeah. Including and it was still open at the time of this closing. The legendary, it survived the whole Giuliani New York cleanup, and then New York getting a little funkier. Yeah. The Varici family peepery.
Really? I was going to guess Circus World, but I think that's down toward 32nd or 33rd.
Yes.
Okay.
But the Varici family peepery.
Wow.
With 2 floor.
Family-owned business, huh?
Yes, the Varici family. They're all very friendly. Oh, hello, welcome.
Oh, my goodness.
So, yeah, they have, so the same place that housed these great sporting events and these great concerts and political conventions and heaveweight fights of the Joe Louis and the Varici family peeperies snuck in with their second floor rumpus room.
Wow. We'll have to do a whole episode on the rumpus room at some point. Great New York landmark, I'm assuming.
So then the garden moved to where it is, above Penn Station.
Yeah, 33rd and
33rd between 31st and 33rd between 7th and 8th Avenue. Yep. And when you think about it, how the hell did they build it?
Yeah,
on top of the existing train station. AJ and I did this New York documentary we've been watching. I made a comment to him like, how did all these buildings, even when they weren't skyscrapers, like it had to be the right kind of land to be able to, it had this bedrock so it could, take all this weight. But that's where the new garden came. And the first event ever at the garden, I'm going to get called out on this, was pro wrestling.
Really? Well, Bruno would have been the champion.
Bruno against Bull Ramos.
Wow. Okay.
I believe that was the first wrestling. It might have been the first event of any event.
It was definitely the first wrestling.
Definitely. And you know what the first concert was?
Whew.
It's a very famous name, but in another incarnation of his career.
Would it have been something with Clapton? Would have been,
Very good.
It would have been Traffic?
Blind Faith.
Blind Faith? Oh, I had to cry today.
Yep,
Yeah, all right.
Yep. Blind Faith.
Yeah.
Mike G, I believe, was there.
Wow.
Yep. So my first time going to the New Garden, my dad, bartender, and working at a nice jazz club, and he had connections. These liquor salesmen would, give him, tickets for the Yankees or the Mets, and he was able to get Rangers tickets.
Wow.
Yeah. And I liked hockey.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going, it must have been 69. I was maybe 12, 13. And that was my first time going to the Garden. And soon after, we went to a couple of hockey games. And soon after that, my dad probably went to, except of course for the Ring of Honor Madison Square Garden event, which for us was the greatest event of all time.
Absolutely.
My dad might have went to the greatest event of all time. What could I be talking about? The first Muhammad Ali, Joe Frazier match.
Really?
Right. There was this guy, Charlie. I can't remember his last name. I remember him. He was like a high roller. He was just doing really well. I don't know if all the money was legit, but he was a patron of my father's place. And that was 1971. And he purchased through a ticket broker of that era, 8 seats that were ringside was $150 because I had the ticket stub. I don't have it anymore. And the guy paid $400 a ticket.
Wow. I'm going to look that up on the inflation calculator as you go through this.
And my dad, this guy got limos, and it was the greatest night of my father's life. They all went, and they went out. My father wasn't a big, even though he was bartender, it didn't matter. He was like a 2-beer guy. And they limoed into the city, and they went for a nice meal. This guy was picking up the whole tab.
Wow.
And they were sitting in the 12th row. And my father says, besides how great the event was, my father, when he came home, and he also got me the damn fight poster, which I hocked. Oh, man. I hocked that. That's like a very valued. It was, whatever. But he says to me, yeah. He goes, Sammy Davis is sitting behind me.
Well, that's like, and we'll get to this when you gave me and Ginley tickets to go see Network, and we'll get to who was behind us,
right? Because
you gave us quote unquote crappy seats. So we'll get to that.
What's your inflation calculator say?
In 1971, $400 is equal to $2,532 in current money.
Right. So this Charlie dude just foot the bill. They had the night of their life. I returned to Madison Square Garden in 71, begging my father to take me to wrestling because you had to be 14 years old with that blue law.
Right.
And we've touched on that.
Had you been a big Bruno fan or Pedro fan?
A huge Bruno. Well, Pedro won the belt at that point. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to go to the Garden to see wrestling.
Had you been to you'd been to Sunnyside Garden at that point, right?
Right.
And that's where they would do the TV and their live events.
The
TV was in DC.
TV was in DC and then in Philly.
Okay, yeah.
But the thing with the Garden was the main reason. Well, I was of age to go, but who's Pedro Morales wrestling? My favorite bad guy, Freddie Blassie.
Ah, okay.
So when Freddie Blassie came to New York, came to WWF TV. Did you ever see when they put the X on the screen?
Yeah. And it didn't change from about 1965 until in 1992. They put the big red X.
So they put this X, like he would bite. Part of his gimmick was that he was the vampire and he would bite the guy.
He'd shave his teeth down, right?
Right.
Ugh.
And so there was blood. And they didn't, it was so horrifying. They would put literally an X across the screen.
But
so,
you could still see some of it, which made it
you'd be at the TV,
right, and there's more intrigue. There'd be more intrigue because you'd be wondering what the heck was so graphic behind the big X.
Right.
Yeah.
So it was Blassie against Morales. We didn't have good seats. They were okay. The great Uncle Henry, who got us those tickets from Manny Hecklin that time for Sunnyside. Mm-hmm. He got the tickets. He just by going to the Garden. There was no Ticketron even. I don't think in 1971.
Probably not.
Either had to go there or mail order, right? So we went to that show.
Did they have season passes yet? Because I remember at some point, at least for the Spectrum, you could essentially reserve your spot by buying sequences of tickets.
They probably did, but I was too young and I was unaware of it. Like Vladimir.
Sure, right. He probably and Mary Kate,
right.
From Mary Kate. Yeah,
but that was years later.
That was, yeah.
So that was 70. That was November of 71. And it was really exciting to be there. My father got upset because when Blassie, the crowd was, 75, 80% Latino. That was just the crowd. Morales was champion.
Sure, he's from Puerto Rico.
When Blassie came out, I'm standing up.
Oh, Cary.
And my father grabbed me by the pants, literally. Says, sit down, you're going to get us killed here. And he might have been right, but it was exciting. And that was my first wrestling at the Garden. Wow. I started going regularly because my cousin Mike got his license.
Okay.
And he was working a lot of these things we touched on. He was working at the Hudson News,
right,
where he was able to take the magazines.
Yeah.
So we would go. This is starting like in 70. It was starting like in 73 through 73 through 76. Mike and myself would go to the Garden almost every month.
Wow.
And it was subsidized by the selling the wrestling magazines. Also 73 to 75. Well, all right. So in 73, I was 17. So, and heavily into rock and roll. Mm-hmm. So my first rock show, well, technically my first rock show at the Garden was at the Felt Forum.
Oh, okay.
And it was Deep Purple.
Wow.
Featured.
Yeah. And
opening act was Rory Gallagher.
Oh, okay.
And it was so loud. So loud. If you look, remember the Guinness, they still have the Guinness Book of Records?
They do.
I think Deep Purple was in there for loudest rock band. I don't know why they would have it so loud. And
did they have the big Hammond organ?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all right.
And that's when the My Woman, well, this is so far before your time, but that there, the album My Woman from Tokyo, or Live from Tokyo was the album.
Yeah.
And it had the My Woman from Tokyo song, and Smoke on the Water, of course, and Highway Star.
Yeah.
These were huge hits. Right.
Yeah.
They were huge.
And he had been in Jesus Christ Superstar, right? Ian Gillian?
Had he?
He had played Jesus in one of the...
in New York?
I think didn't he sing the soundtrack? Wasn't he the vocalist for the movie?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I will have to get somebody to get up on that, but he's one of the Ians I'm named after.
There you go. Yeah. And was it a great concert? I don't know. It was too loud. And then we went to Zeppelin.
Wow.
At the Garden in 73. That was the Houses of the Holy tour.
Which the song Houses of the Holy is not on the album, right?
Correct.
Which has always bothered me.
But it had so many good songs.
It's a great album.
The Ocean, Die Your Maker.
Yeah.
The Rain Song.
Yeah.
Song Remains the Same.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to that. They needed an extra guitar player on stage. In other words, they couldn't recreate the album sound.
Yeah.
And I was 16, and I was a little disappointed the next month I went to Jethro's Hall, which I didn't want to go to.
Wow.
Because I was like, well, where's it at? It's at the Garden. I said, I saw Zeppelin a couple nights ago. It just didn't sound good. They're like, come on, we're all going. So we went to the Tull show, and which was the opposite of Zeppelin in the fact that whatever song they did, whether it was Cross-Eyed Mary or Locomotive Breath or whatever, it sounded just like the record. And I was like, that was, that really sold me on Tull. And there were a lot of shows in that 74, 75 period. I mean, historic shows that I saw. Elton John, wow. Thanksgiving night of 74.
Really?
Which was the last time ever, John Lennon appeared live on a stage. They had the record, they had the single, Whatever Gets You Through the Night.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
And there was also a bad, it was a Beatles, they did some kind of Sgt. Pepper's movie. It didn't really
Peter
work.
Frampton and the Bee Gees.
And, right. And Elton did Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds in that.
Yeah.
And it was sort of a flop, but as a song, it was okay. So you had those two, you had that. And it was almost hinted on New York radio, on old WNEW FM and WPLJ, which was a rock station,
right.
That it was like, it wasn't even a rumor. Like, we got a feeling John Lennon's going to be at this show.
Yeah.
And he was. And that was cool. Also in that period of time, I saw McCartney's first tour post Beatles when the first time he did Wings Over America.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we went to the Garden for that.
So this becoming a habit, and this becoming somewhere you're hanging out and you're seeing all these bands.
We would go to anything. And it was, not to mention, speaking of the Beatles, and this wasn't that good.
Don't tell me you're at the concert for Bangladesh.
No, but it was a George Harrison show.
Okay, yeah.
And it was either the Dark Horse Tour or All Things Must Pass.
Wow, that's a great album.
It just didn't play well live. Maybe it was the set list. But contrary to that was when the Who came with Quadrophenia. Holy smokes. Yeah. That was amazing.
Yeah, and you still, you invited me to the Who last year. You still go up and see the Who.
Yeah, and you know who the opening act for that was?
Who's that?
Talk about one of the great one-hit wonders, and the song still remains a classic rock rotation staple to this day. Golden Earring.
Oh, Radar Love?
Yeah. Right. So
wow.
there were so many good shows. I mean, and we would go to see Black Sabbath, or we'd go to see, whether it was Black Sabbath or if it was Billy Joel.
Yeah. We
didn't really care. We would just go, and the Garden was the destination point for these mega concerts. There were other venues we went to also.
Yeah.
Strangely enough, although they were hugely popular, I was just turned off by the whole Grateful Dead thing.
Interesting.
At the time.
Yeah.
Although I loved, the band and the Allman Brothers.
Yeah.
But I'd heard about these Dead shows being these 4 or 5 hour marathons. And I was good with a 2 hour show.
2 hours is plenty. I've been to Pearl Jam concerts that are 2.5 that feel like 6. So yes. I can empathize. Even Bruce. I mean, we talked about how much I love Bruce, and 2 hours is plenty of Bruce.
He's trimmed it down over the years. Yeah. He's Pearl Jam.
Who was the most obscure band that you ended up seeing? Would it be Golden Earring? Specifically at the Garden, what's the least amount of fame that you saw open up?
Well, that's a good question.
For instance,
do you know James Taylor's brother?
No.
You don't know did you know he had a brother?
No.
Livingston Taylor.
Okay, and is that so he has a nephew, and that's who he wrote Sweet Baby James for, the nephew. I wonder if that's Livingston's son?
I don't know.
Okay.
But Livingston Taylor was totally miscast. And you know, the audiences were pretty polite.
Yeah.
For the most part. But they had Livingston Taylor open up for Tull in like 77 or 78. And the Tull fans were pretty savvy, but they wanted no part of Livingston Taylor. And who else did I mean, oh, God, there was so many. You caught me off guard here. I'm not.
You see anybody like the Raspberries or anybody?
No.
The great Eric Carmen?
No. There. Oh God. We'll get back to some more of this. But
Honeycomb, the one ads.
There's a ton of shows, and I continued going to wrestling. My cousin fell off at a certain point in like 76, and
That's right when Bruno comes back, wins the title. Yeah,
and I would continue going. Maybe not every month. I'd have to drag somebody. This is the period where you had to drag somebody. Yeah. You know what that's like.
Yeah. The plight of the wrestling fan. You had a certain age. And
I remember going to the Bruno Superstar Billy Graham Texas Death Match.
Yeah.
And
that was a ref stoppage, if I remember correct.
Probably.
So that because Billy Graham was the champ by that point. He'd won in Baltimore. And they didn't want to. The rumor had it they didn't want to change it in New York. There was fear.
Worried about that.
Yeah.
Right, and then it turned into the Backlund era.
Right.
And I didn't go as much. I was more involved with my cocaine use started. That's when I was working with these bands, and the coke came in the picture. So I wouldn't go as much. So it was very hit and miss, but. Going into the 80s, I was there Bully Ray was there, and Mick Foley were there, all his fans.
Wow.
For the Snuka, when Superfly Snuka jumped off the cage for the first time with Don Morocco.
Wow.
I was by myself because I couldn't get anyone to go.
Really?
And I bought a 4th row ticket out in front from one of the scalpers who I didn't know. For like $30, probably was every penny I had.
Yeah.
And that was cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, that was good. Sticking with the garden here. Did we tell the story on the podcast of the WrestleMania one?
We did, spinning the gate. Spinning the gate.
Going to WrestleMania 1 with my friend Harry / Cosmo.
Did it ever become sentimental? Or was there a point where it became sentimental? Because you've essentially just led us through kind of growing up. You go from a teenager to an adult, and then as a young man, you're suddenly, you keep getting drawn back to this central location. The name of the podcast, Last Stop Penn Station. I mean, you're there. It's like a magnet in your life. Yeah.
It was like almost like I don't know if I could say a second home, but it was one of those very familiar places. And so when I started hustling tickets and I was there on the streets working, all these events, we're talking 86, 87, 88, 89.
They start to renovate in 89.
I had mentioned the Dead. Mm-hmm. Well, now the Dead had their resurgence with the
Touch of Grey.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And what was the name of the album? Was that?
I forget the name of the album, but that was their technically one-hit wonder. That's the only song that ever charted.
Well, they would do, I'm not making this up, they would do anywhere from 8 to 12 nights at the Garden.
Wow.
And it was tickets. You could just, they never would spend a lot of money, but people just wanted to get in, you know? And if you knew these ticket brokers, which I did by then, that would have leftover seats, because ticket brokers of that era would just buy as many Grateful Dead tickets as you could. You're not going to make a ton of money. You're paying $20, you sell them for $40. Maybe if you have you got lucky and you got a few good ones, you could sell some fronts for, $100 or whatever. So there would always be leftovers. And the Dead were there so many nights on these runs, and I was flying, and that's when I would go into the shows.
Wait, flying on Casey Jones?
Yes.
Okay. All
yes. Right. And there'd be like a show, and there sometimes there was a day off, but often they would run in a row, and I would go into a show, stay for an hour, an hour and a half. Just
it's like when you have a season pass to a theater. Like I close to Dorney Park,
like,
you go and you go
take
out.
A rest. Take a rest. There was this guy, the famous Mailman.
The Mailman, not Karl Malone.
No. One of the guys that was one of the great diggers, Tommy Indio, who was a good friend of Ralph the Mummy.
Okay.
He's like, "Oh, can I turn you on to the mailman?" I go, "The mailman?" So there was this guy. He was a former mailman. He'd retired, and he had an apartment. It was on 20th Street, between 8th Avenue and 7th Avenue. And the good thing about it was right near the police station. It was a very safe block.
Yeah.
And the one thing about the mailman was you were able to go to his place, and he would cater to he was retired, but he would cater to these other mailmen.
Really?
Who, after a long day of trudging through, what's their motto?
Through rain or sleet there. Right. So there's a mailman scene is what I'm picking up.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
So on my way to the Dead show, I remember somehow parking illegally by 8th Avenue and 20th Street and going and hanging out at the mailman, and you would sit down there for a half hour. He'd give you a couple beers as long as you bought some stuff. And then I'd be back up to the garden for the Dead. But as we've touched on, the garden was the center. It was the mecca of the ticket hustling, and whether there was an event or whether there was an event. Mm-hmm. And that was just the office. You checked into there. And I continued going to events during the whole time I was, doing tickets. And when I finally got get off the street and eventually moving out in this area and cleaning up my act, it was still the concert. It was still the concert mecca, and it was still the wrestling mecca, even in the bad periods of the.
About what time? What years would you say it was? Mid-90s?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't go that often.
Yeah.
Once, there was probably a period of time between the late 80s and the 2000. It got good in the late 90s, but where I didn't go to much wrestling at the Garden.
And they had a break too with the renovation in '89, and they'd run more Continental Airlines. They come back. They do SummerSlam '91. I think it's their first big one in August of '91.
That's correct.
That's their big welcome back at that point. They had done some other events.
I remember going, you got to help me here. Mm-hmm. It was a Royal Rumble of 2000?
Royal Rumble 2000, yeah. Yeah, Mick Foley and Triple H. And
that was good.
Yeah.
That was good. Yeah. That might have been my first return to the Garden in a while. And then when Ring of Honor started up, or was going, there was a referee. I don't know if you know this name. You know the name Gary Morer?
No.
Yeah, he was one of the early refs before Todd.
Yeah.
And
before Paul even.
Yes, and I was friends with him, and he was a good guy. And I remember going to the Garden to see, I hope I get this right, Flair against Bret Hart or Flair against Shawn Michaels in 2004.
That was probably Flair and Shawn Michaels,
Right. And it was like 4,000 people there.
Wow.
There was no one there.
Yeah.
And they put on a really good match.
Oh.
And the next time I went we're doing this off no notes, folks. The next time I went was the ROH weekend where we did the Rexplex.
Okay, so that would have been 04. That would have been
Right.
Mania 04.
Right.
Yeah.
The Flair one might have been a few months before that. They
Sure.
didn't draw. But the WrestleMania drew obviously was so that was the Benoit
and
Eddie Guerrero double crowning.
Well, while we have you on the topic of Eddie Guerrero, there's a clip that's been circulating around Twitter, and it features Eddie Guerrero and his last ECW appearance. And he's walking around the outside. There's a very familiar face that gives him a nice big hug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you? Well, we can divert a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I don't think we've ever talked about it on the podcast.
Well, the ECW, as much as I liked a little bit of violence, I wasn't crazy about, complete violence. And I really liked, the Guerreros, the Dean Malenkos, the
Jericho.
Jerry Lynn's and Jericho's, and who were the luchadors that were there?
They had Psychosis and Rey Mysterio, and I think Juventud may have done one or two events. Yeah,
and those matches were so good. And Guerrero, I had front row for. I had 6 seats together, section D, and so for where the hard camera shooting, where the sign guy is, I was to the left, and he just came around. So why shouldn't I hug him?
Yeah. Very
I haven't
touching.
seen that clip.
Someone posted it just a couple of days ago.
Oh, very cool. No one tagged me.
Yeah, it was big hug too. It's like you were friends for years.
Well,
but that shows you were still following wrestling, even though you hadn't been quite drawn back to the Garden. Was there a reason you didn't go back? Was there bad memories or feelings?
Well, ECW was going on.
Sure.
And I was a regular
there.
Right, and it was just no. I didn't really care for what WWE was doing at that time. When Rave Review started, my ticket agency, one of our first big, amongst other things, wrestling was a huge ticket at that time.
Wow.
Between the Nitros and the Raws. And it not necessarily didn't have to be at the Garden. If it was at the Meadowlands or if it was at Spectrum, or if it was at NASA Coliseum, there was a period of time where it was like a guaranteed you could move them.
Even at Stabler Arena, I remember having to pay a premium to even just get in. Yeah,
right. It was a couple of years that went on, but So post that 2004 wrestling at the Garden, I can't even remember.
Yeah, did you? This is going to be a weird question. You might understand it. The folks that are listening might not. I lived in New York for 4 years. By the 4th year, I wanted to go. I wanted to leave. I was burnt out. Didn't want to see it again. Obviously, that's changed. I go back frequently. I met my wife there. We did Madison Square Garden, some of my fondest memories. Was it just convenience that you hadn't gone back? Was there a conscious decision at some point where you said, I'm going to turn everything around and I need to be a little bit removed, or a combination of both?
Well, it was primarily the wrestling. I was going to a lot of concerts still.
You're still good. Okay.
Whether it was, I don't have the list here, but an Elton John show.
Yeah.
Or I remember going to a Bowie show in early 2000s, and U2 and Bruce and Roger Waters.
I remember they did a Traffic Blind Faith big double,
that one too.
Yeah.
I went double
reunion. I think
that was great.
Yeah,
and I'm leaving a bunch out. I went, I remember going with Larry Sweeney to see Stevie Wonder at the Garden.
Wow.
Like 2007 or 8. So I went to a lot of Garden events, and I left out something. I mentioned going to hockey with my dad.
Yeah.
But I had a minor hockey revival.
Really?
In I don't know. It was somewhere in the
Rangers won the Cup in '94 with Messier and
but
Leach.
It was before that. Richter. It was in the '80s, and it was more of a thing of like. Up in the blues seats, they used to call them the blues at the Garden. It was like a party central.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you could smoke weed and wide open, you know, and it was more of a scene. So, and I had some friends that had season tickets. They were very cheap at the time, and the Rangers weren't great.
No.
So we used to go to that. But except for the, you know, plenty of concerts, but not a lot of wrestling past the Ring of Honor period.
So New York still kind of felt like home. There wasn't any kind of, because I remember I personally just wanted to get out, stay out for a little bit.
No, I always, and I still feel to this day that it's just a good vibe for me. You know, and I can't wait till we get to go back to
Yeah, Zach.
You know, there's that energy.
I'll tell you, Zach's seen it in movies now, and he's seen it on the Ninja Turtles. And to tell him it's a real place, his mind is blown. He's been there. You've hooked us up with the Frozen tickets on Broadway, but he doesn't quite remember it. Doesn't remember the enormity of the buildings. To tell him that these giant buildings are real and the Statue of Liberty is real, his mind is blown.
Well, when all this stuff sorts itself out, and Zach's getting to the age of where you could take him to things, and he's going to have some appreciation for it. It's going to be really exciting. Yeah, no doubt about it. Which leads us up. Yeah, it leads us up. I mean, you're talking 04. You're running Ring of Honor. The buildings are getting a little bit bigger over time. 06, you draw the big house, Dragon Gate weekend. We talked about that. We talked about going to Japan. At any point, did you consider an arena, a stadium? Was there ever any thought at any point? I know Houston, that's a big building, but you had it spaced nice. You had the pipe and drape. No, we honestly, I never had illusions of grandeur. No, it wasn't there. In a fantasy world, sure. Yeah, but it wasn't there. So the idea of ROH, my ROH, being a major arena, let alone Madison Square Garden, that was just a pipe dream or a real fantasy. Yeah. So that wasn't even in the cards at all. How'd you find out that Ring of Honor was going to run Madison Square Garden? Well, as you know, it was being bandied about quietly. Yeah. Because they didn't have we could talk about this now. We can talk about it open. Yeah, I think this is all. They didn't have the deal yet. They had the deal, but they didn't have the deal. I remember that. I believe there was a verbal commitment. I was approached by somebody. I don't feel comfortable giving their name. And they said, "You won't believe it." And then they wrote the 3 letters down, MSG. And that was we were cooking with Ring of Honor. We were about to do 2 tours of the UK. And we had the deal, but we didn't have the deal. We had a verbal handshake, but we didn't have the date. So that's the way I remember it. Right. Also, the stars were aligned right, because once again, we couldn't have done it if there wouldn't have been a WrestleMania coming to Giant Stadium, basically the New York City area. So that had to be there, right? And that does not take away anything from Ring of Honor or New Japan. Right. But that was the idea, that there's going to be an extra 70,000 wrestling fans. On top of what's here already in New York City. And if I'm not mistaken, there was a day where the deal went south, right? Well, and before we even get to there, we'll get into the limited knowledge that I have of that. We needed some luck too, because it's April. What goes on in April? In addition to a Saturday night in April, if Lady Gaga's not playing, if Aerosmith isn't coming through, if Billy Joel's not coming through, the playoffs. Yeah, it's the hockey. Right, hockey and basketball. And it takes a minor miracle to have nothing going on on a Saturday night in Manhattan in Madison Square Garden. It is a minor miracle, because all these bands that we've mentioned, and Billy Joel plays once a month, and whether it's Pink
Yeah,
or it's
great.
Metallica,
Yeah.
or Pearl Jam. They book these dates, well a year into the future. And as we know from our good friend Gary Juster, there's these holds.
Right.
So if Pink, the great Pink,
I love Pink. She's wonderful.
Well,
Doylestown's own. Yeah.
if she's got a hold on the Garden for April 6, 2019, and Ring of, soft hold.
Soft hold, yeah. Deposit, minor,
right. And
safety deposit.
And Ring of Honor comes, the Garden's going to be looking at who's going to be selling the most merch.
Yeah.
Who's going to be selling the most alcohol and hot dogs.
Yeah.
That's a huge factor.
Yeah.
So they're going to want to go with an established entertainment, whatever the entertainment is. They're going to want to go with an established act. And let alone there wasn't the luck of the draw that either the Knicks or the Rangers just didn't happen to have a home game that day.
Yeah, which is incredible. And also the WWE, all things considered, chose to run Brooklyn. They chose to run the Barclays Center after years and years of establishing Madison Square Garden. I mean,
I think it was the second time in a row they had done that, though.
It was. And the big thing to me is that in the new Madison Square Garden, the 68 version, no one else had run. And WCW had attempted to run the Felt Forum. Previous to that, it might have been a Jack Pfeffer card in 59 and 60. And those were not McMahon family cards.
Correct.
But that was the old Garden. So Ring of Honor was trying to do something that literally no one had done before. Gary Juster, who's a masterful promoter, who essentially brought the NWA and Jim Crockett promotions to Vince McMahon's doorstep by going to DC, going to Baltimore, coming to the Philadelphia Civic Center, going into Long Island. That's something he's never done either in 25 years of promoting, and he had promoted just about everything and everywhere.
Right. Gary had booked just about every building, including stadiums.
Yeah.
All over the country. I was going to say all over the world, but I think it was primarily the U.S. But be that as it may, he's booked every major building. So then there was the problem of WWE blocking us after everything had been. And Ian will correct my version of the story. This is the version I know,
and this is all allegedly.
Right.
Yeah.
We got the date. We bring Joe Koff, Gary Juster, and Sinclair. Got the date. The Garden approving the date. And basically paperwork was signed, I believe.
From what I understand. Yeah,
and then Vince McMahon and AJ, what was happening that weekend, and AJ was at the show, WWE was running Giant Stadium Sunday. Our show was Saturday. But WWE had the Hall of Fame ceremony and the NXT, that minor league, but they were all at the Barclays Center.
Well, great wrestlers, most of which came from Ring of Honor. Kyle, Adam, Roddy.
It was NXT directly against us?
They actually switched, and I don't know if it was deference or if it was they knew New Japan Ring of Honor was going to have a great show. They put NXT on Friday and put the Hall of Fame on
So they
Saturday.
had Friday at the Barclays, Saturday at the Barclays, Sunday at Giant Stadium, Monday Night Raw at the Barclays, Tuesday night, the SmackDown, that's now Friday night, that was at the Barclays. So they had committed to 4 dates at the Barclays, and they basically had snubbed the Garden, which, in the old days, WWE used to run once a month.
Right. Mondays, right?
On a Monday.
Yeah.
And then as time went on, it was maybe down to 6 times a year. And then eventually, as business slowed down, it went down to just a few times a year. And when the Barclays Center came in, the Barclays was able to give not just WWE, but Bruce Springsteen, you want to play the Barclays? Well, it's half of what it costs you at the Garden. So how much loyalty are you going to have to the Garden? Certain bands and certain performers at certain things did stay loyal to the Garden because of the prestige. I remember one of the first bands that went to the Barclay that was a huge band was Rush.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
For whatever reason. But
and we'll get to Geddy Lee in a future episode.
Yeah, but Anyway, we have the date, we have the paperwork, and then allegedly, we don't know, I don't know the real story, there's a phone call or there's communication with Vince McMahon contacting Madison Square Garden like, hey, we've been with you guys since my father's time for basically 60 years. And I know we're in Brooklyn for 4 nights, but, we're going to be back, guys.
Which they did. They came back.
Something like that. And guess what happened? Madison Square Garden, for maybe it was 24 or 48 hours, they bowed to that. Am I telling it right?
Well, if the timeline lines up, and I think it does, in that time, I had recorded essentially a secret voiceover announcing once the paperwork was signed, I received video with the logos that you ended up seeing with B-roll of the Garden that was announcing Ring of Honor and New Japan were coming to Madison Square Garden April 6th with a ticket on sale date and everything. I was told to keep it confidential at the time. I recorded it. I sent it right back. I told no one. And I was told within about 24 hours that, hey, really don't say anything. It's off. It is off. And so that would line up with everything that I experienced.
Wasn't there something with one of the Sinclair brass?
Yeah, I believe it was the CEO of Sinclair who, I think in the Baltimore Business Journal or it was one of the local Baltimore publications where he had actually mentioned it in an interview that would be published shortly after the hullabaloo as well. That kind of either tipped somebody off or there was some timing. Based on when it was published, I'm not sure of the timeline. The interview could have taken place at any given point, but I believe it was the CEO had mentioned it in an interview that Ring of Honor and New Japan would be running Madison Square Garden.
Well, whether the Garden decided that we're going to give these guys a chance, and Vince McMahon, he's screwing us. Sorry, Vince, you're doing 4 nights down the street from us.
Across the river. Yeah.
So you could come back here, but for now, we made a deal. Mm-hmm. So it got flipped. Yeah. And there we were. The paperwork was signed. We were coming. Vince McMahon, I guess. Allegedly, he just, had to suck it up for once. Mm-hmm. And we put the tickets on sale.
19 minutes.
Well, there was a pre-sale.
Right. The pre-sale did very, very, very well.
Well, I remember the pre-sale very well because I bought...
Because you get it through Honor Club, ROHHonorClub.com.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I had some of my guys, some of these internet diggers, mm-hmm. Sign up, get codes, and I wound up getting 600-700 tickets.
Wow.
And I didn't really have any fear that I was gonna lose money or all of a sudden I had all these tickets and but I was like, oh no, what's going to happen when it goes on sale to the public? Mm-hmm. And it went on sale to the public after this pre-sale and it sold out. Yeah. Bang.
Yeah. It was only 19 minutes because the servers were going up and down and
Right. And Cary was able to get rid of his tickets. I don't really, this is nothing to, I wound up, I bought too many as I tend to do. And I didn't lose money. I gave quite a few away to my friends. And it was all fine. But the thing was, there we are with months ahead of time, knowing we're going to Madison Square Garden on April 6th. And those tickets went on sale in August.
In early August. I was in a business meeting in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'd ran to the bathroom to compulsively check my phone to see if they sold out. I knew when they were going on sale. I excused myself. I was refreshing my phone. That was crazy. So we had, 8 months to think about the Garden.
Right.
Yeah. And January comes around. I'm expecting my daughter. My contract is up. So here I am. I'm suddenly, this dream that I'm about to experience with Jay Lethal, with Matt Taven, with Marty Scurll. I have to make a decision. And I remember sitting in Atlanta. There was
we'd be remiss to say that of the guys that we lost.
That's true. Yeah. And in between that,
it comes into your story.
It does. We had done All In September 1st. You were ringside for that. I was called the action with Excalibur and Don Callis. And it was headlined by Cody and by the Young Bucks. They were in the main event. And them and about 6 other men and women decided that there was a new adventure to go forth and seek out. My contract was up April the 1st, which was something that they had been made aware of, and that I had friends in WWE that had been made aware of it also. And there's some mutual interest among parties because I was still relatively young man, and it's always been my dream. You watch WWE growing up, or you watch Bruno, and you see Vince, and you hear Vince, and excitement. And, WWF's the biggest game in town for a long time. And so the Madison Square Garden looms over us as we go into the new year, and I have a baby on the way. And we just seen the departure of all the talent.
Right.
Yeah.
It was strange because a lot of people thought that the show was predicated, and Cody and the Bucks and good old Christopher Daniels and some of these other guys,
Frankie Scorpio,
right?
Best friends.
They were Ring of Honor mainstays at that point.
Yeah.
But as it got closer, and I'm glad you made the decision to stay with Ring of Honor.
Well, I'm glad too. I mean, we didn't tell the story. You gave me the courage to walk up to Joe Koff and say,
I did.
You did in Atlanta. We were also the two of you were sitting in the room, and you said, I think you should re-sign Ian. I think you should give him whatever he wants. And I gave him a number that I thought was fair, and he thought it was fair. And next day we had a deal. And there I was on my birthday, January the 13th, knowing that I was going to the Garden. So.
and I'm glad that happened. And I'm also, as we were leading up to the Garden, and our good friends Cody and the Bucks and all those guys, this new company was starting.
Yeah.
We had the relationship with New Japan,
right,
which we've had for many years.
6 years at this point.
And there was no doubt. I don't think any fans, put it this way, and this is no disrespect to my good friends, the Bucks or Cody or anyone else. I don't think anybody wanted to get a refund because these guys weren't on the show. They knew they were going to get an ass-kicking wrestling show, and plus with the New Japan talent.
Amazing.
And it was sort of, no one was asking, there was talk going into the show, like within that, what if the people are booing, or we want Cody,
yeah, or people
like
walked out, and then there was that weird rumor. So we've had some interesting folks come in and out of the locker room. Do you remember the rumor that was planted by one of the folks that isn't currently in our organization, that Cody would actually come back and win the belt and bring it to AEW? And I was told this at the time. I think it's one of those weird wrestling things where you see if somebody will pass it along and see how far it goes. So that the AEW is a work and this and that. And talk about conspiracy theories.
I think I know who said that.
Yeah. So it's one of these crazy things you look back on. It was such an uncertain time. But to your point, Matt Taven, Jay Lethal, Marty Scurll delivered to pull up on the team bus. I came in on the bus. I was sitting with Colt and Colt. We called the event together. Caprice was behind us. Shane Taylor, Todd Sinclair. We were all sitting pretty close and delirious. And to pull up, we see Jay Lethal and Jay White, as the champions of the organizations on a banner. And you see the Ring of Honor logo, the New Japan logo. it was incredible because we did the Felt Forum event the day before the big press conference. That's when it really started to feel real.
Yes.
Introducing the distinguished folks from Ring of Honor and from New Japan, introducing the title matches. And then, I mean,
I remember when it was real for that whole, period of time. But I remember I was staying at the Hilton, and the day of the Garden show, not the fan festival, the day of the Garden show, it turned out to be a nice day that day.
It's beautiful.
And walking down the street, I took the subway from 50. I got changed at the hotel, so I'm there looking nice. And going down, I took the subway.
Beautiful tailored suit, brand new. I remember,
brand new, right from down here in Easton.
But it was beautiful, and you had a beautiful tie too. Yeah,
from the London shops.
We'll give them a plug. They sponsor a lot of the great school activities here. They do a lot of the musicals and things. We'll give them a plug.
Yeah, and I take the train. I guess it was the F train, and I go from Radio City to 33rd Street. So I get off at 33rd and 6th, and I'm walking down 33rd Street. And it was at 33rd Street, I was talking about those Dead shows and all my time at the Garden. 33rd Street was, there was a bar called the Blarney Rock. Not the Blarney Stone. There was a lot of Blarney Rock. And at 33rd Street, I used to hang out on a lot because it was away from the Garden, but there was always customers. So there I am. Once again, I find myself in 2019 walking down 33rd Street. Am I hustling tickets? No. I'm in a suit. Am I going to see Pedro Morales against Freddie Blassie? No. Am I going to see Led Zeppelin? No. I'm walking down 33rd, heading due west. So I'm coming up to 7th Avenue. And it was like a perfect, it was like an eclipse because simultaneously there was wasn't there like a banner kind of sign?
Yeah, there was the banner that had
right. There was the banner sign, and when I got within because you have to be near the corner of 7th Avenue to see the Garden sign. It said, it had the G1 Supercard.
Yeah.
On the logo. Yeah. On the sign. G1 Supercard. However they worded it. Ring of Honor Wrestling tonight sold out. Right.
Incredible.
And I'm looking at this. And
you must have been thought you were smoking crack going down to the club again.
Here it is.
There's the press. There's the all access pass. Right. I didn't get one. They ran out. I have a bracelet. I have the lanyard. I don't have the actual pass.
And I was able, so you went through the security.
I went through the athletes entrance, which was pretty cool.
Right.
Yeah.
It's funny. The Garden is it's elevated.
It is, which I never knew. Right. I never realized because I would always go through the Penn Station, the entrance with the banners and the signage where the Penn Station escalators come up, which is 33rd, I believe.
Did you notice while being backstage, there were all those great pictures of
beautiful,
Mick the Stones and this one and that one, Frank Sinatra and just
Bruce
and Patrick Ewing and Wayne Gretzky and all these great pictures. Did you notice in the dressing room, which the Knicks, I don't know if it was New Japan's dressing room or it was ours, but it was the Knicks.
Yeah.
Or one of the basketball, and it said there was a sign about no gambling.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
I did.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you've seen The Last Dance and Michael Jordan.
Yes, right. But they had a no gambling sign.
Well, we had the Rangers and the Rangers away locker room. So we also had no gambling sign. Now that I'm thinking about it. But ours was not as prominent as the one that was in the Knicks locker.
I thought that was so odd.
Yeah.
But
How about the big massage tables, right?
Massage tables were
That was
nice.
almost like a table shower table almost.
What are you talking about?
I've never heard of that.
The other thing was backstage. About every 90 feet, there was a security guard.
Yeah.
Remember that?
I do.
Just like as if you were like, like the president.
Yeah.
But if you had the little pass,
You didn't have to.
you were cool.
Yeah, you were in.
And since I was dressed, Ian was dressed as nice as Eugene had a tuxedo on.
I
right?
did, yeah, which Kevin Kelly gave me a little bit of gruff for.
But they, somehow, as maybe it was just in my own head, but as time went on during the night, some of the guys back thought, since I was older, that's what it was. I was one of the bosses, right? So they were like,
You are the boss. I mean,
ultra respectful. It was sort
you
of
deserve
silly.
that deference, Cary.
Oh, thank you. So we went into the garden, and that's when it was real.
Yeah.
When you're in the garden itself, and you're looking up at that famous ceiling, which is indescribable.
Yeah.
And seeing those banners from the various sports champions, or even, Billy Joel's 75 shows, Elton John's got one up, and even the Dead. And it's just, that was special. And I spoke to Joe Koff about this, and I spoke to you about this a little. It was a magical night. I don't know if everyone in our crew
Understood.
was aware of the how amazing, I'm having trouble articulating this.
So I'll use an example. PJ Black wrestled in the Honor Rumble.
Right.
Been to 62 countries. He wrestled there once before. He wrestled Bret Hart when Bret Hart made a small comeback in 2010. I saw him to a person walking up to the younger guys, telling them, take pictures, remember every step you take. You don't get, he had to wait 10 more years to get that feeling. And the way he described it, you never know when it's going to happen again. This might, hopefully it happens again, but it might not ever happen again. Bully Ray, same kind of thing. Walking up to the young guys. This is the garden. This is why you wrestle. Unless you're wrestling in the Tokyo Dome or you're in Arena, Mexico, there's very few other places that can top what you're about to, or be on equal footing to what you're about to experience. And so for me, I love Ryan Nova. I don't know if it'll ever compute with him, and not to say that Ryan Nova's not a bright guy or smart guy, but for him and Eli Isom to be out in Madison Square Garden, or, the recently departed Hana Kimura.
Yes.
21 years old when she competes in Madison Square Garden. And, for her to experience something, what a magical person, always lit up a room, always just fun, but for some folks, that's, they're with the crew for just a little bit and all of a sudden they're in Madison Square Garden. I knew there was a lot of folks that didn't take it for granted. Todd Sinclair certainly had perspective as a regular Boston Garden.
Bobby too.
Bobby, yeah. Bobby's with Ring of Honor for as long as almost anybody. Yeah,
I think the guys that are more sport fan guys, including like Brian Malonis.
Yeah.
Or Matt Beer City.
Well, and Beer City's been grinded for years. And, I talked to him. He never thought Madison Square Garden would be in the cards.
Nobody did.
Yeah.
And the other thing that happened, and I don't know if you remember this, and Gary Juster wants to pull me into a room before the show and say, I got to talk to you for a second. You know what I'm going to tell you?
No, I don't actually.
And I'm like,
is it about that Cody rumor that was
What's he going to tell me? Well, what happened was the normal walkout music for the Ring of Honor show is the countdown and the locomotive breath, right? This whole music. And, we might have a pre-show, we might have a warm-up match. And then sort of when the show's maybe it's not. If the show is an 8 o'clock show, 7 o'clock there might be a warm up match, and we don't play any music. I mean, and then we'll do the warm up music to pump up the crowd. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was they were scared to play the copyrighted tall music in a large venue like that because there's.
You probably would have to pay a fee or a license, a royalty.
Right. There's right. And I knew for a fact because Joe had told me that they had paid a ridiculously small amount of money to BMI, like $2,000 to be able to use Locomotive Breath whenever they want, except if it's on, it can't be on any video or. So in other words, you're paying $2,000 for Locomotive Breath.
You can't broadcast it.
But you can never broadcast it.
Sure.
You broadcast it's probably $10,000 just once.
Right.
Or something, whatever it would be. It's a lot of money.
Seems like a good deal, though, to continue the tradition.
So I figured they had it, and we're not broadcasting it. So Joe didn't want to tell me. Joe just didn't want to tell me, So when we did the walkout, which was there was no one in the building yet. Remember that?
Yes.
There was like maybe 1,000 people.
It was a late arriving crowd. But to be fair, we did about an hour's worth of matches.
Yes.
An hour and a half's worth of matches. We did the women's match, and then we did like an hour and 15-minute rumble beforehand. So the ticket says, let's say 8, and we're going at 6:30.
So my big walkout moment was with nobody in the building with this generic music. And I remember walking out, and I'm looking up. It's like it didn't matter. I'm at fucking Madison Square Garden. You can play Mary Had a Little Lamb. I'm walking out, and there was enough people to get a little to get a reaction. And guys like Greg H. And we're at ringside, and Terry and some of our super fans. So I was able to walk around, and within a short period of time, by when the Honor Rumble was starting
to fill up,
and AJ was there, all my friends were there, the place was packed, and it was just amazing. It was just amazing. Bobby Cruz was trying, there was a Japanese
for New Japan, because we had some dual matches.
Correct.
And then we had some Ring of Honor, and then we had some New Japan.
So I'm at the table, and there's the girl at who was Amy at the bell?
Amy was at the bell,
Yeah, and Bobby has to look over at the Japanese guy. There were certain cues, and I was just having a blast. And Bobby's like, he goes, sit down, I can't see the guy. I go, leave me alone, I'm just having fun. Right, so we got through it. And I basically stayed out the whole show except to go visit some of my friends. I don't know if I saw AJ that night. I don't think I did. But he was there. My cousin Mike was there. Some of my friends from the Midwest came in. Dustin came up from Atlanta. A lot of my other local friends were there, and the night just flew by.
Yeah, I called about 6 hours of wrestling. It felt like a.
Did you go take a leak?
Nope. No. No. And here's the crazy part: I counted the bottles, 11 bottles of water.
Really?
16 ounces.
Oh, it's nice to be young.
I got back. I gave Colt a hug, Caprice a hug, Kevin a hug, and then I took the longest pee I've ever taken. It was like the weight of the world was out of my bladder and off my shoulders. I'd been sick that morning.
I walked over. I don't know if you remember. You probably don't remember this, but I remember at the very, very end, because it was New Japan match. I walked over at the very end to the announcing table.
Yeah.
And I think when you guys were wrapping up,
we had a beautiful platform, nice union setup. And some of the crazy things that you've probably not heard, we didn't have a production meeting that night.
Oh, I remember that.
So Kevin and I, Kevin just said, hey, it says Ring of Honor, go for it. Lead us. I trust you. I taught you, so I'm either going to live by the sword or die by the sword. So we had our format, we had our run sheet, and we did the best we could. And we had some great direction that night from Mark Brown, and Delirious was in my headset quite a bit. The no production meeting thing was kind of weird because I was told I'd have no entrance. And then all of a sudden I hear my music and my head pops up on the screen. And they didn't tell me how to get down to because off the stage, we had the big platform that was raised. So I either had to make a 30-foot jump or I had to go all the way down the ramp.
You went down.
I went down. Yeah, I said, F it. I'm in Madison Square Garden. My wife is here. I'm gonna walk down I'm gonna walk down to the ring. So I walked down, and somebody got a video of it, posted it online, so that I'll have that forever. Just wild night we had. I mean, it was so nice because there was an effort to get everybody in the company involved in the event. Right. So that night I called the matches with Colt, with Caprice, with Kevin, with Chris Charlton, with Nick Aldis, with, I'm probably forgetting somebody. I had so many partners that night. And I got to call matches that I normally wouldn't have. You know, we had Jeff Cobb versus Will Ospreay start the night.
Yeah, that was great.
Incredible. I got to call the great Muda.
How about Muda and Liger coming out for the Battle Royal?
And then face to face at the end.
That was amazing. And another thing for me was I got to not once, but twice. No, I didn't wrestle. But I got to go in the ring. There were 2 title changes. Yeah. One,
Women of Honor Championship.
The Women of Honor Championship, and Kelly was crying. Yeah. And she knew. To her credit, she knew where she was and how important this was. And then the great ladder match with Lethal, Skrull, and Taven. And I remember Todd handed me the belt and waiting for Matt. And I just said to him when I get there, I go, look where we are, man. I go, congratulations, man. And he's such a sweet kid. He gave me a kiss, and it's out of character of that rotten man that he is. And what
rotten Bostonian.
Right. Yeah. What a moment. And it's surreal even talking about it.
I don't believe it happened. Right. Jay Lethal grew up in Elizabeth, right outside the outskirts of the Newark airport. You know, for him, that's the Madison Square Garden. And just talking to him about, you know, how he used to go to work with his dad and open up cans of Mountain Dew and talk about, you know, becoming a wrestler and his journey. All of a sudden, he's on the poster outside of the banner, the 3 times life-size banner. He's hanging outside Madison Square Garden. It's up for weeks at that point. Just the hear the roar when Okada wins the IWGP Championship. You know, that was a special moment too. You talk about things you don't get to do every day. You're doing it in the world's most famous arena. To talk to some of the New Japan guys, Tanahashi speaks wonderful English, and I got to talk to him a little bit, and he was blown away. And this is a man that's walked out of the Tokyo Dome.
Tokyo Dome with 40,000, 50,000 people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have a lot of, I don't know what was going on, but the New Japan guys were pretty much to themselves for most of that weekend, and you know, I'm not real close with them. They're completely friendly and completely cordial, but
just don't know them as well as some of our guys. And Jay White, though, that was special for me.
Jay White's cool.
Yeah, Jay, who came up, you know, he left everything, you know, all the way across the world. Comes here, lives in Detroit, comes to Japan first, goes through their dojo system, comes here, lives in Detroit, breaks in with us, goes back, becomes one of the biggest stars in the world, and all of a sudden he's in Madison Square Garden.
And Zack Sabre too.
Yeah.
He's a good guy.
Yeah.
So it was something. So for me, talk about coming full circle.
Yeah. And that's, I mean, there's a lot of things that I'm sure have been worth it to kick the things that you've kicked and overcome, but that's got to be, you know, looking back.
Yeah, it's beyond a dream come true. It's beyond anything. It's like hitting the Powerball. The odds of this happening. Seriously, the odds of this happening the whole, just all the events leading up to. It's like nobody, when I was standing outside trying to sell those bad company tickets in 1986, and there's no one there in the garden with 6,000 people, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ! Like, and if someone had said, yeah, you'll be involved with the wrestling company, you'll be in the ring twice at Madison Square Garden in 2019, like, yeah, we're talking 1,000,000 to 1.
Yeah, that's the equivalent of a parlay.
Right.
So many things. I allegedly know what gambling is, and the parlay would have to be a sequence of events,
right,
in a particular order, and
it'd be like playing roulette, and there's 36 numbers, including a 0 and a 00, and playing like number 8 and hitting 10 times in a row,
after time after time
for that to come in. So I'm grateful to everyone that helped me in that journey. And I'm grateful to, and I'm lucky. I'm lucky to, and we're gonna, as the new season rolls out, we're gonna talk about some things and a lot of the reasons why I shouldn't have been there at all.
And some of the people that have either helped you or enabled some of these things, which makes it incredible. And the one thing that I think gets overlooked a lot, and I'm sure we'll talk about Jim Cornette. I'm sure we'll talk about Gary Juster and Joe Koff. But to have the sense that this thing could keep going and to know kind of where the limit was, to say, you know what, I've got it as far as I can. It's time to give it to a bigger operation. It's time to make that happen. And I think that's one of the more underrated decisions. And I'm sure we'll talk about that when we talk more about Gary Juster.
Yes.
We'll talk about Joe Koff and then some of those meetings. But we're also going to be talking about John Belushi, Ric Flair.
Neil Peart.
Neil Peart. This one's season 2 is going to be a wild one. Cary's very modest.
What's the guy from Squeeze? Glenn Tilbrook?
It
owes me $50.
50. I'm sure he's good for it. I'm sure.
He owes me $50. Yeah.
He's not up the junction, I'm looking forward to it. And we hope you enjoyed this episode of Last Stop Penn Station.
Yeah, and please subscribe. And if it meets your fancy, we have some merch on Pro Wrestling Tees. The beautiful Last Stop Penn Station.
Got the T-shirt
designed by Basan Creative, and the fabulous He Eats Breakfast, the Camel.
That's his theme song. And he was right. We need a shirt that says the Camel was right.
Baby Dumplings, through the magic of our podcast.
Yeah.
Baby Dumplings has reunited with me on Facebook.
Really?
Yes.
Of all the folks that you've described, I would have thought Baby Dumplings
would be no more.
Yeah, or he would be somewhere.
And I didn't even know what his last name was. And
not Dumplings.
It's Kelly. And Dumplings honored himself. I saw on one of our many sales we've had on Pro Wrestling Tees. Dumplings bought a shirt. He's in New Orleans.
Wow.
He's part owner of a tavern. Next time I go down to New Orleans, we're gonna go see Baby Dumplings.
We're gonna go hog wild. Exclusive interview with Baby Dumplings.
He's awesome.
Oh, that sounds great.
Baby Dumplings.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to season 2. We're gonna keep this train rolling. We're gonna keep socially distanced. We're gonna keep staying safe. And I'm looking forward to doing this again. It's good. It's good to be back. It's good to physically see each other.
A lot of fun.
And this shall continue. I'm looking forward to it. So this has been Last Stop Penn Station, the great season finale of season 1. We're going to be back with season 2. Let's say next week. Let's hold it to it.
Sounds good.
If by hook or crook, if we can't start the people season, we'll do a bonus episode across the internet. How about that?
We could do something, that's for sure.
All right. Well, for Cary Silkin, I'm Ian Riccaboni. Thanks for joining us. Last Stop Penn Station. Happy wrestling. And rate, review, subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
I thank God it's still the habit and the pain and
listening to Last Stop Penn Station podcast. Rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or at laststoppennstation.com.